Have you ever held a rosary in your hands, not knowing it was quietly blocking the very graces you were praying for? There are sacred objects that carry protection, and others that carry something far more dangerous. Padre Pio, the stigmatized friar who could read souls and see the invisible, once warned about a particular kind of rosary, not because of its shape, but because of its color. He said, "Not all devotions are pleasing to heaven. Some, though prayed sincerely, carry poison." This message is not to create fear, but to open your eyes. Because many homes today unknowingly harbor a rosary that invites darkness instead of light. Today, we'll reveal the colors you must never wear or use, how to test your rosary, and what to do if you've already been using the wrong one. The rosary, in its truest form, was never intended to be a piece of jewelry or an ornament of culture. From its very beginning, it was forged in the silence of prayer, shaped by the tears of the faithful, and strengthened by centuries of devotion. Padre Pio often said the rosary was the weapon for these times, a weapon forged not of metal, but of repeated petitions from the heart, wounding the enemy with every Hail Mary. But in recent years, something has shifted. The sacred has been softened, and what once belonged to the battlefield of the soul has been rebranded as an accessory. People hang it from their rearview mirrors, wear it as necklaces to match outfits, or even tattoo its outline across their skin, unaware that each careless use strips it of power in the spiritual realm. Padre Pio was deeply grieved by this. To him, the rosary was not a string of beads. It was the sound of Mary's footsteps approaching the soul, the echo of Calvary whispered over and over until heaven answered. He would often clutch his rosary tightly in his trembling hands, even during moments of agony, knowing that the repetition was not mechanical but mystical. Each bead, each prayer, when said with faith, became a wound on the enemy and a balm for the soul. But when the rosary becomes decorative, its meaning collapses. Its power fades into background noise. It becomes part of the scenery, not the solution. Padre Pio warned that demons are not afraid of objects, but of intention. They do not tremble before a rosary lying in a drawer or glinting from someone's neck at a party. They tremble when it is used in real prayer, in real faith, especially when held with tears, said aloud and spoken with full attention to its mysteries. The rosary was not meant for show. It is not a badge of culture or tradition or identity alone. It is a call to arms. Every Our Father is a trumpet, every Hail Mary a sword, every mystery a cry for divine intervention. When used correctly, it binds. When used superficially, it fades. Many people keep rosaries in their homes, never touched, never blessed, never prayed. Some even pick them up only in times of fear or death, as if the beads alone will protect them. But Padre Pio reminded us that the rosary has no power. Apart from prayer, it is prayer that moves heaven, not decoration. He warned of rosaries that were made with the wrong purpose, manufactured in bulk, sold without blessing, sometimes even crafted in unholy spaces or with hidden curses. These become objects of distraction, or even spiritual confusion. The faithful must remember, the rosary is not a magic charm, it is not a superstition, it is not a spiritual prop for appearances. It is a doorway. Used rightly, it opens the way to Christ through Mary. Used wrongly, it becomes noise, or worse, a silent block to grace. To return the rosary to its rightful place, the heart must change. One must see it again as an invitation to daily combat, a companion in suffering, a lifeline in spiritual warfare. This begins by treating it not as something beautiful, but something necessary, not because of how it looks, but because of what it does. In the life of Padre Pio, the rosary was as constant as breath, and he never once called it a decoration. He called it a shield, a chain, a sword, and a gift that no one should ever forget how to use. Padre Pio was not a man of superstition, but of discernment. He believed in the deep spiritual reality that surrounded every sacramental, every object of devotion, and every prayer. For him, the Rosary was not merely a set of beads, but a vessel for grace or a potential channel for confusion, depending on how it was used, and even what it looked like. He understood something that most overlook, that colors, forms, and symbols carry not only aesthetic meaning, but also spiritual resonance. It is not about fear or paranoia, but about vigilance. In his private spiritual direction, Padre Pio warned of 3 specific rosary colors that, while popular, often carried with them a hidden danger, not always because of the materials themselves, but because of the environments, energies, or intentions they could be tied to. The first was the black rosary with red marbling, often found in trendy religious shops or sold as masculine and bold. Padre Pio observed that this color scheme had roots in imitation, the red intended to represent the blood of Christ. But distorted and mingled with black, it echoed ancient patterns used in occult practices. This was not the blood of redemption, but a mockery of it. He spoke of souls who prayed with such rosaries and yet reported confusion, anxiety, and restlessness in their lives. He believed the design itself, coupled with its widespread use in secular environments, distorted the intention of prayer, turning it into something self-focused or performative. For the enemy, who thrives on distortion, such rosaries are tools to keep hearts unsettled, even while they believe they are doing something holy. The second was the pure metallic gold rosary, especially those polished and overly ornamental. While gold in itself is not evil, Padre Pio saw that when the rosary became a display of luxury, pride crept in. He warned that vanity could hollow out even the most sacred devotion. The problem was not in the metal, but in the heart posture it encouraged. He observed that some people who carried these golden rosaries did not pray with them, but wore them for show, turning a sacred weapon into a symbol of self-importance. Padre Pio feared that such rosaries could blind the soul, leading it to believe it was safe because of an object, when in truth its interior life was dry. He emphasized that a humble wooden rosary, blessed and used with love, had more power than the most expensive one left untouched. The third color he warned of was the bright neon, or glowing plastic rosaries, especially in unnatural greens, blues, or luminous shades. These were becoming popular with children and the youth, often handed out in large numbers at events. Padre Pio cautioned that such colors, though seemingly harmless, appealed to the senses rather than the spirit. He believed they introduced distraction, trivializing the sacred by making it appear like a toy. Worse, some of these rosaries were produced in factories that had no regard for faith, sometimes even in environments hostile to Christianity. The combination of artificiality and commercialism, he feared, diluted the spiritual authority of the rosary itself. He said that prayer must elevate the soul. Anything that pulls it down into playfulness, vanity, or spiritual confusion must be examined and removed. Padre Pio was not interested in external rules, but internal clarity. His guidance on colors was not about legalism, but purification. He wanted the faithful to ask, does this help me pray better? Does this image, texture, and tone lead me to Jesus through Mary? Or does it invite pride, fear, distraction, or discomfort? The rosary is a bridge. And a bridge built with the wrong materials may stand for a while, but it cannot bear the weight of a soul in distress. That is why the saints always preferred simplicity, humble materials, earth tones that remind the soul of Christ's suffering and Mary's purity. When the rosary reflects heaven's light, it draws heaven near. But when it reflects only human vanity or spiritual confusion, it becomes a beautiful chain, one that binds rather than frees. Padre Pio's message was clear. Not all rosaries are created equal. Some must be laid down in order to truly take. Up the one that brings peace. She was a faithful woman, known in her small Italian village as someone who never missed a mass and always carried her rosary. Her neighbors often said she prayed more than she spoke, and her hands were rarely seen without the familiar rhythm of beads between her fingers. For years she offered the rosary daily, for her children, her deceased husband, for peace in the world. But what no one knew was that her home had grown heavier with a strange atmosphere. Despite her constant prayer, anxiety clung to her like a second skin. Her sleep was broken by nightmares. Unexplained noises crept through the walls at night, and relationships with her family began to crumble without clear reason. Her devotion was real, but the fruits of peace and clarity were nowhere to be found. When she traveled to San Giovanni Rotondo to attend confession with Padre Pio, she brought a well-worn rosary made of dark glass-like beads with streaks of red. It had been a gift years ago from a distant relative who had visited another country. She thought nothing of it. It was beautiful, unusual, and felt personal. As she approached Padre Pio's confessional, her heart felt heavy with confusion. She poured out her soul to him, naming her struggles, her lack of peace, her persistent fears, despite prayer. Padre Pio listened quietly. Then, before giving absolution, he asked to see the rosary she had brought. She held it out, expecting him to bless it or say a kind word, but instead his eyes grew solemn. He gently took it into his hands, turned it once, and handed it back with only 5 words. "Do not use this again." She was stunned. He saw her reaction and added softly that this rosary had been spiritually contaminated, not cursed intentionally perhaps, but created in a way that invited oppression rather than grace. He did not elaborate. He simply advised her to stop praying with it, to burn it, and to begin again with a rosary made from natural wood, blessed by a priest. At first she struggled to obey. The old rosary had accompanied her through grief, through illness, through years of routine prayer. How could it suddenly be unworthy? But she trusted Padre Pio, and in trembling faith she did as he said. She returned home, destroyed the rosary, as instructed, and obtained a plain, simple wooden one from a nearby monastery. It felt strange in her hands at first, rough, humble, silent. But within days, something shifted. Her sleep returned. The anxiety began to lift. Her home felt lighter. Prayer felt easier. Her children noticed a change in her face. It softened. The spiritual heaviness that had clung to her for years seemed to melt away. Looking back, she came to realize that it wasn't only the object itself. It was the lack of discernment that had kept her in bondage. She had prayed with faith, yes, but unknowingly with a tool that disrupted the very grace she was seeking. Padre Pio often taught that the enemy does not always stop the faithful from praying. He allows the motions so long as they are diluted. A rosary created without reverence, or worse, with spiritual corruption, can turn devotion into dryness. It is not the number of prayers that brings power, but the purity of what holds them. Her story became a quiet testimony in her village. She never told it with anger or fear, but with humility. She would often say that God used even the wrong rosary to lead her to the right one, and to a deeper awareness of how spiritual warfare sometimes hides in the smallest details. She learned that even sacred things can become traps if we do not examine them with spiritual eyes. From that day forward, her prayers no longer felt blocked. They flowed like breath, like light. And she never again saw the rosary as a decoration, but as a living line between earth and heaven, meant to be held with clean hands and a discerning heart. Not every rosary is created equal. While the prayers themselves never lose power, the physical object we hold in our hands during those prayers can either support our devotion or subtly distract and weaken it. Padre Pio understood that the material and the spiritual are not separate. They are connected. The Church has always taught that sacramentals like rosaries are conduits for grace when treated with reverence, blessed properly, and used with sincere faith. But for a rosary to truly become a source of protection and spiritual strength, certain principles must be followed in choosing it. The first and most important principle is simplicity. Padre Pio himself used plain wooden beads, small, unpolished, humble. He knew that the enemy feeds on pride and vanity, even in spiritual practices. A rosary that glitters with luxury or tries to impress visually may please the eyes but rarely strengthens the heart. The best rosaries are not those that attract attention, but those that disappear into the hands of the one praying. They are meant to lead the soul upward, not call attention to the object itself. Simplicity invites purity, and purity invites power. Secondly, the material matters. Natural substances, wood, stone, even simple cord or olive pits, have long been associated with sacred use. These elements, taken from the earth and offered back through prayer, carry a symbolic purity that artificial or overly processed materials often lack. Padre Pio discouraged the use of cheap plastic rosaries, especially those with exaggerated colors or produced in factories disconnected from any sacred intention. He warned that such rosaries, while not evil by themselves, often carried a spirit of mass production, of thoughtless manufacture, and sometimes were even made in places that mocked the very faith they were meant to represent. A rosary meant for spiritual protection must also be blessed by a priest. This step cannot be skipped. A rosary that has not been blessed is still a physical reminder of prayer, but it lacks the Church's spiritual seal. Blessing is not a superstition, it is a consecration, a setting apart of this item for holy use. Without it, the rosary remains neutral. With it, the rosary becomes an instrument aligned with heaven. Many faithful forget this, or assume that owning the object is enough. Padre Pio would often say that grace flows most freely through what is made holy by intention. Another essential aspect is the origin of the rosary. Padre Pio encouraged the faithful to acquire their rosaries from sacred places, monasteries, shrines, trusted Catholic stores connected to prayerful communities. He was wary of objects bought without discernment from markets, secular vendors, or unknown online sellers. The source of a rosary influences its spiritual tone. A rosary prayed over by religious hands or made in a house of prayer often carries with it a hidden fragrance of sanctity. One made with no love, no intention, or even with spiritual hostility, can carry a subtle coldness that lingers. Finally, Padre Pio taught that the most powerful rosaries are the ones used with love. Even a simple string of knots becomes mighty, if prayed with tears and faith. The rosary must not be stored away, left to gather dust. It must be held, worn thin by daily use, soaked in whispered mysteries. A beautiful rosary kept for display is powerless. A simple one used every day becomes a shield. The one who prays it regularly forms a bond not just with Mary, but with heaven itself. To choose a rosary that brings protection is to choose one with spiritual seriousness. Look for what is modest, made in prayer, blessed with authority, and used with consistency. Avoid what is showy, trendy, or spiritually anonymous. And remember that the heart behind the prayer matters more than the hand that made the beads, but when both are holy, the result is truly a weapon of light. In Padre Pio's own life, the rosary was never far from his hands. He died clutching. He lived praying it constantly, and when asked about its power, he said simply, "Love Our Lady and make her loved. Always recite the rosary." For him, the right rosary was not just a devotion, it was a line of protection, a rope for climbing out of darkness, and a constant call for divine mercy. Those who choose carefully and pray faithfully will never walk alone. Discovering that the rosary in your possession may not be spiritually safe can be unsettling, especially for someone who has prayed with devotion and trust. Many faithful Catholics acquire rosaries as gifts, souvenirs, or beautiful items of faith without fully considering their origin, blessing, or purpose. Padre Pio was deeply aware that some sacramentals, if made or used improperly, could become sources of confusion or even spiritual oppression. But his teachings always offered a way forward: never fear, but faith; never paralysis, but purification. If someone finds themselves owning a rosary that feels spiritually wrong, the first and most important response is not panic, but discernment. The first step is prayer. Bring the situation before God in sincerity and humility. Ask the Holy Spirit for clarity. Padre Pio often said that the soul who sincerely seeks the truth will never be abandoned. Pray a simple prayer of discernment over the rosary, asking, "Lord, if this item is not of you, show me clearly and help me act rightly." Sometimes the answer comes as an internal unease, sometimes through counsel, and sometimes through direct spiritual experiences. If the rosary has been a source of discomfort, fear, or confusion, especially if these feelings increase during prayer, it may be a sign that something is not right. The second step is examination. Consider where the rosary came from. Was it bought from a secular source, mass-produced in a non-Catholic environment, or received from someone whose life or beliefs were spiritually questionable? Does the design reflect sacred simplicity, or does it imitate dark or occult symbolism, glamour or superstition? Is the rosary plastic and glowing, made in imitation of worldly trends, or does it reflect the humility of Mary herself? Padre Pio urged Catholics to treat holy objects with reverence, and part of that reverence includes knowing their origin. If doubts persist, the third step is to take the rosary to a trusted priest. Not all questionable items need to be destroyed. A proper blessing can sanctify a rosary and redirect its purpose. However, Padre Pio warned that not every object can be redeemed through blessing alone, especially if it was made with malicious or spiritually impure intent. A priest can help discern whether the item should be kept or removed. In some cases, he may suggest destroying the rosary, especially if it was found to be cursed, heavily connected to superstition, or spiritually harmful. If the rosary must be removed, it should not be thrown away carelessly. Treat it with dignity, even in disposal. Padre Pio recommended burning it in a safe and respectful manner, accompanied by prayer. One might say, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I renounce any spiritual harm connected to this item. I destroy it under the authority of the Church and the protection of the Blessed Virgin Mary." After burning, the ashes can be buried or discarded in a natural space, not in regular trash. This act is not magical, but spiritual. It is a declaration that the home and the heart are to be kept clean for God alone. Following removal, it is essential to cleanse the space spiritually. This can include sprinkling holy water, reciting deliverance prayers, or inviting a priest to bless the home. Padre Pio emphasized the importance of reclaiming territory once darkness has been expelled. A simple prayer of protection might be offered. "Immaculate Heart of Mary, fill this space with your peace. Cast out all confusion, fear, and heaviness. Let only the light of Christ remain." The home should then be reoriented with sacred items, an image of the Sacred Heart, a crucifix, a candle, and above all, a blessed and trusted rosary. Finally, once the false rosary is gone, replace it with one that is spiritually safe. Acquire it from a Catholic monastery, a place of pilgrimage, or a trusted church source. Ask a priest to bless it before first use, and then begin anew. Let The new rosary be prayed with fresh intention, daily commitment, and deep trust. Let it become not just a tool, but a companion. Let every bead be reclaimed for heaven. Padre Pio never condemned those who were deceived. He offered mercy and instruction. He believed that God permits these trials not to shame us, but to awaken us. If someone has prayed with the wrong rosary, the answer is not guilt, it is purification. The heart matters most. And when the heart chooses to cleanse what is unclean, God rushes in with peace. The enemy may deceive, but heaven restores. Every soul that returns to the path of discernment and reverence receives more grace than it ever imagined lost. The rosary is more than beads. It is the chain that binds demons, the lifeline for souls in darkness, and the song that brings light to hearts weighed down by despair. But only if used rightly. Padre Pio saw what most never see, the invisible weight behind every prayer, the war behind every distraction. That is why he gave this warning, not to instill fear, but awareness. The enemy is subtle. He will not always stop your prayers, but he will try to hollow them out. A flashy rosary with cursed elements, or one treated like a fashion item, becomes a spiritual echo, empty, even dangerous. If you're unsure about the object in your hands, return to simplicity. Choose what brings peace, what lifts your heart toward heaven. And above all, never let your rosary go unused. The greatest danger is not the wrong beads, but the silence of a Catholic who has forgotten how to pray. Today, examine your rosary, hold it, look at its color, feel its weight, and ask, does this lead me to Christ? If not, replace it. Bless it, use it. Your prayers are needed now more than ever.